And participants.
This meeting is being recorded.
We're going to maybe wait another 1 minute for the final participants to join, and then we'll start the webinar. Thank you. Okay, sorry we're 5 minutes late, but thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Clara Gonzalez. I'm the co-director of the Business and Human Rights team at ECCHR. I will be moderating today's webinar. I will introduce you very shortly our fourth speaker. So today's session, very briefly, is about the Syngenta case that is currently litigated in front of the Swiss courts, and the export ban coalition efforts that have been recently reactivated to obtain a European Union ban on exporting pesticides that are banned on our own territory and soils within the European Union. In terms of the program, so we will listen to the four speakers we have today for around 40 minutes, and then we will have time for a Q&A at the end of our webinar for a total of approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Lara?
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt, just I got an email from 3 participants that they have registered for the webinar, but that they haven't received the instructions to join, and so they were asking for the link. Could you, it's Shayla Willis from Pan UK, but a couple of them.
I will take care of it. I will take care of it.
Thanks a lot.
Maybe, Laurent, you can forward this email to Maria, so Maria is sure to have the name of everyone.
All right, we'll do it.
Yeah, her last name,
yes.
ECCHR.eu. Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you so much. Then I will take 2 minutes to introduce our speakers so we can let the time to for these people to join us. So first we will listen to Dilip Kumar, who is the CEO of Pesticide Action Network India, Pan India in short. Pan India is a public interest, not-for-profit research organization based in India and part of, the broader Pesticide Action Network around the world. And Dilip is the CEO. He specializes in pesticide risk management and has been working on pesticides-related problems since 2013. Then we will listen to Dr. Narasimha Reddy Donti as Chief Advisor of the Maharashtra Association of Pesticide Poison Persons, the MAP. And the MAP is community-based and organized association that has been doing collective work with farmers and farm workers that have been affected by pesticide poisoning since 2017, trying to ensure locally justice for the pesticide poison person. And then we will listen to my colleague, Teresa Mokel, who is a legal advisor within the Business and Human Rights team here at the ECCHR, which is the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights. We are a human rights Berlin-based organization doing mainly litigation and supporting this case together with Pan India and Public Eye for a few years already. And then finally, we will listen to Laurent Gabriel, who is the food and agriculture expert of Public Eye, which is the third NGO that is supporting the Syngenta case in front of the Switzerland court. So hopefully now we have everyone around, I was going to say around the table with us, on the Zoom with us. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, Dilip Kumar, as the CEO of Pan India. After you.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Clara, for your nice introduction, and thank you, my co-presenters. Allow me to share my screen. I have a very small presentation. Yeah, so basically, I thought I'll take you all through what happened in India in 2017, and which actually led to filing in 2 cases at the Basel Court in Switzerland, demanding justice from Syngenta for the poisoning cases, especially for those cases filed. And it was like in 2017, somewhere in July, August, September, the media reports were unusually high number of poisonings were seen in this media report, and everybody were not sure about what is happening, but the news were showing that a huge number of farmers and farm workers getting admitted in hospitals in Maharashtra, especially in Yavatmal and neighboring district due to occupational poisoning. So particularly higher number of pesticide poisonings were reported in Yavatmal district, and followed by the other district like Nagpur, Chandrapur, Amravati, Buldana, and Akola districts, and which is the cotton belt in India, where the predominant crop is cotton. And following this media report, we decided to do a fact-finding visit in October 2017, and we visited the hospitals, we interacted with farmers, we interacted with the farm leaders there, who were actually highlighting this issue in the media, that a number of farmers and farm workers are getting uh, various kind of symptoms and ill effects due to occupational exposure. So these were happening at the time when farmers or farm workers were spraying pesticides in the field, and by the evening they either get headache or kind of mild symptoms, and in the night they develop severe symptoms like vomiting, unconsciousness, and all. So that was a situation when we were visiting, when we were having this fact-finding mission. And this map shows where it actually happened. It is in the western part of India, and particularly in the cotton growing regions, which is known as the Vidarbha region, and Yavatmal being known as the cotton city, historically known for cotton in India, and where the highest number of poisoning reported. And following our fact-finding mission, we found various issues, like farmers were taken to hospitals, but hospitals did not have enough facilities to accommodate the huge number of poisoned people came in. So we released our fact-finding report with several recommendations, and followed by we initiated a poisoning research, a detailed field study to know what has happened by directly interviewing 200 plus farmers who were directly affected with poisoning, and we came to know that almost all of the farmers and workers who suffered this occupational poisoning did not even receive trainings on pesticide use or safety precautions to be followed, or they were not advised on personal protective equipment or what kind of PPE they have to use, because it is hot and humid weather. And we also realized that even government agencies and health professionals and the companies who were blaming farmers and farm workers for not using personal protective equipments, and they attribute the risk to the farmers' neglect on using PPE. But the fact is the otherwise. Farmers or workers who were not able to use recommended personal protective equipment because of the tropical climatic conditions. And during this time, the temperature, the ambient temperature is around 30 degrees Celsius. The average temperature is 30 degrees Celsius, and with the high humidity, so nobody can use PPE at this time. But despite this fact, and this fact being known to pesticide companies and government, they allowed use of such products in the country is something crucial. That's what we see. And depending upon the information we gathered, and also we cross-verified various symptoms with the available medical reports, and we could identify a broader 6 categories of symptoms and illnesses, which include neurological illnesses, ophthalmological illnesses, respiratory illnesses, and dermatological illness, gastrointestinal illness, and others like is sweating of chest, face, and eyes. So broadly, these were the symptoms we noted. And in our studies and also in the government reports, they named a few pesticide active ingredient at that time, and government of Maharashtra actually brought a prohibition for 5 active ingredients, and which include diphenthyrone, which is an active ingredient in the Polo, which is a Syngenta product. So Polo was the second mostly reported pesticide in the poisoning incidents, both in medical document as well as in the police records, because in India every pesticide poisoning cases has to be treated as a medical legal cases, which requires police to conduct an inquiry and file a report. So that's of most of these poisoning cases getting reflected in the police records, and we verified that as well. And if you look at the Polo pesticide, its active ingredient is diphenthyrone, and the World Health Organization has classified it as a slightly hazardous pesticide based on its acute toxicity, and is a pan-highly hazardous pesticide. And of course, it do not have an antidote. And the health effects includes eye irritation, respiratory tract irritation, toxic if swallowed or inhaled, and it's a probably kidney toxic. And the European Chemical Agency reports that toxic if inhaled and may cause damage to organs through prolonged or repeated exposure if someone is exposed to diphenthyrone. And it is also evident from the Polo's leaflet is that poisoning can cause symptoms of subdued behavior, prostration, lethargy, proliferation, headache, giddiness, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, sweating, excessive lacrimation, salivation, etc. And most of the symptoms seen in the leaflet were also detected among the farmers and workers whom we interviewed, and who we find a direct linkage with exposure to Polo. And coming to the sufferings of the victims of this occupational poisoning, we directly saw many were hospitalized for several days to for at least 4 weeks, and many of them were tied to the bed due to restlessness or involuntary movements, and many of them were also not knowing what is happening to them. Their relatives were did not understand what has been happening, because this incident was such a maybe a first kind of massive poisoning, occupational poisoning happening in that time. And once they left from the hospital, they were suggested to take rest for several months, and they were advised to have a good diet and all. And many of them, we found that suffered these health issues, were continued to suffer the health issues even after the hospitalization. And what we later came to know that nearly 30% of the participants in the survey which we conducted were not able to continue their profession of farming or farm work, because they couldn't get into the sun and do the work because of particularly due to adverse reactions on their eyes and face. And from the hospital, we came to know that most of the death at that time were due to respiratory paralysis, and so that's how the death happened. So we came to know that there's a regulatory lacuna happened or incurred in the current regulatory system, both at national level and global level, that actually led to the poisoning. And we came to know that diphenthyrone being banned in Europe, but has been exported to India that time, and this has to be stopped. That was our one of the major demand. And at the same time, we also demand stringent regulation in India is needed when it comes to the point of importing pesticides which are banned in Europe or elsewhere. And in order to support the farming communities and farmers who suffered poisoning, we were trying to bring remedy to the these victims, and we initially organized some medical camps, and then we thought we need to explore some international platforms to bring in remedy, because this pesticide Polo being manufactured and marketed by Syngenta company is an actually came from Switzerland. That's what we learned. So we thought of exploring the OECD's process, basically attributing the breach of guidelines meant for multinational enterprise, business enterprises. So we attempted to, not we helped the farmers and workers who were poisoned with this pesticide Polo to pursue a specific instance complaint at the OECD, where they demanded justice and some remedy for the sufferings happened in India for these farmers. But unfortunately, Syngenta denied the role of Polo pesticide, and this mediation ended without any outcome. So that happened, I think. Clara, I'm not sure about my time.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say you're just in the time limit now. So if that's fine, we can move on to Dr. Reddy, and then we have more time in the Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you then. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dilip. I'm now turning to Dr. Narasimha Reddy Jonty. So as the Chief Advisor of the Maharashtra Association of Pesticide Poisoned Persons. After you.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. I will add on to what Dilip from Pan India has mentioned. There are actually in India 3 unique phenomenon or situations which we need to remind ourselves. One, India is a unique place where mass pesticide poisonings regularly keep happening. Also, 2017, Yavatmal or Vidarbha-based pesticide poisoning is not, is not isolated. We had actually in 2002 similar pesticide poisoning, mass poisoning in Warangal, right now in Telangana. At that time, it was Andhra Pradesh state. And even in 2017, we have seen some poisoning cases happening in Tamil Nadu. So we keep looking at it. So why I'm mentioning this unique is it involves community monitoring, and only the courage of certain individuals who could bring out such mass poisonings. So I'm not sure if similar cases are happening, but not being revealed. And I have enough information to tell you that mass poisonings may be happening, but until and unless some individual, like in Yavatmal, brothers, they looked, they brought it out, and then we entered and we worked on that. So this is one I wanted to bring out. Two, India is promoting pesticide trade internationally. In fact, we have been, the government has been encouraging exports of pesticides because India has a very cheap production, and active ingredient production can be very cheap in India. So India is, in fact, encouraging export of pesticides. But what is hidden is the imports of pesticides. And there, as Dilip mentioned, not much information on diaphanthurian is available. and even on paraquat, which is again imported into India. Not much information is available. So there is a transparency issue. There is also a regulatory huge black hole in terms of regulation and also transparency. Third, I want to bring it out is because the pesticide poisoning are happening, we don't have that capacity in terms of treatment, in terms of assessing the toxicity, and in terms of infrastructure which can respond to poisoning as and when it happens. So in the case of Yavatmal, we have seen uniquely within 1 2 months, at least 1,800 farmers coming to district hospital. So usually they come to district hospital only when they pass through a local medical doctor in their village, and if we can't do anything, then there is a rural health center, and from there they are referred to the district hospital. So we have been suspecting many more farmers who might have been affected, but they had acute symptoms, but which might have been solved or which might have reduced with some minimal medical attention. So this 1,800 coming to a district hospital within a 1 month period means it's a huge load on the hospital system, health system. And this again, the ability of the health system to respond to that mass poisonings is very low. In fact, I feel many of the deaths happened because the hospital staff, despite their efforts, could not give personal attention because most of you might know in poisoning cases, depending on the level of poisoning, they need to be monitored every minute. Basically, fasciculation, emasculation, pupil, eye undulation. So all this requires a very personal attention, which is impossible in Indian public hospital system. Now, I'll come to the other issues. Basically, the regulation is very lacking in India. We have a Act, 1968 Insecticide Act, where imports and exports are just mentioned in a word. There is no provision with regard to regulation of that. And then poisoning itself does not get mentioned. Even though 1968 Act was brought in when there was a huge tragedy in 1958 when at least 72 people died after eating a pesticide contaminated flour somewhere in India. So even though the act came as an aftermath of pesticide poisoning, the act itself is lacking in even monitoring poisoning, leave alone regulating. So in this sense, the modern imports and exports, since this is a 1968 act, modern imports and exports, basically in terms of quality, in terms of the efficacy, and in terms of protection, basically biosafety for humans and also other forms of life, is completely absent. And that's the reason we see paraquat imported into India lacking any certain chemical which induces vomiting. So today we are finding not only diaphanthurium, paraquat is causing a lot of deaths across India simply because that essential safety element which was supposed to have been there in other countries is not there in Indian paraquat. So this itself shows uniquely that no regulation. Now I'll come to the final phase where we, civil society, community organizations went to the court because in 2006, When we found pesticide residues in soft drinks, then the parliamentary committee was appointed. Then the government admitted that 66 pesticides banned elsewhere outside India are continue to be used in India. So government, after people went to the court and in the parliament, then they appointed committees. So there were a series of committees, but ultimately these committees, and after their recommendations, government has banned only one or two pesticides, but did not again go into the core question where why we are using banned pesticides outside, which are banned outside, why we are using them in India. So far there is no satisfactory answer. Now, recently, Government of India has brought out a amendment to pesticide regulation bill. I mean, there is a draft and there is a consultation process. In fact, this is not the first time. It was brought in 2008, then 2010, then again in 2020. This is the fourth draft we are looking at. But in this draft as well, we don't see any regulation of imports, such as the cases Polo or paraquat or anything. The major issue there is India does not have a liability provision in the Act. So the companies, like in US or other countries where they are facing lawsuits from individuals who have been harmed by the hazardous pesticides, in India we can't access the courts. So that's where this case which has been filed against Syngenta on Polo from Yavatmal is very unique, and it is going to be a unique case if it is as it progresses. So we need that regulation, we need the liability, and also we need transparency in our pesticide regulation so that we can address these issues in general arising out of pesticide poisoning, where children are being killed or children are being exposed right from mother's womb to their daily life as well. There are a number of poisoning incidents we have been documenting, but the issue is government is not taking responsibility for that poisoning. So whether it is international trade, whether it is domestic use, Indian communities are facing severe problem of non-liable system. I think this is a major issue which I thought I'll bring it to your notice. Thank you, Lara. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much. Perfectly on time. I will now pass it on to Teresa Mokel, legal advisor of the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, to talk more of the specific proceedings you were mentioning happening against Syngenta in Switzerland. So give me 1 minute that I share my screen for you, Teresa.
Thank you, Clara. Yes, I think you can go straight to the next slide, actually. So, as Dr. Reddy already mentioned, the question is if, in light of what we've heard about the horrific consequences of the use of these pesticides, which are really badly regulated, not only in India, but also globally, the question arises if there's any way to legally challenge these companies, the manufacturers of these pesticides, who continue to produce and export them even though they know exactly about the risks for those who are exposed to them. And I will present now two legal actions that were taken in Switzerland, where Syngenta, the producer of Polo, which played this major role in the poisoning in this poisoning wave in Yavatmal in 2017 is headquartered. So I'll start with the OECD complaint, which Dilip also already mentioned. Just briefly, what is an OECD complaint? It is based on the guiding principles on guidelines for multinational enterprises for responsible business of the OECD, which is an international organization dealing with like economic matters of and between its member states. The guidelines are not binding, but they have a grievance mechanism, which is the national contact point, which can decide on, or the national contact point can assess whether a company has breached these guidelines, and then they can arrange mediation between the complainants and the company. And if no mediation or if no agreement is reached, the NCP can also issue a final report that assesses the company's conduct. So that sounds kind of nice, if at least something that could be done there. But it's also important to mention that this is not binding, and companies can choose if or to which extent they engage with these proceedings. But it was still decided to give it a try, given the lack of other possible legal avenues, really. So the complaint was filed in September 2020 by 5 organizations, which are mainly the ones that are here: MAP, Pan India, Public Eye, Pan Asia Pacific, and ECCHR. And it concerns specifically the situation of 51 victim families, and demanded for compensation, financial compensation to these families, but also that the company adopts measures to prevent future cases of poisoning. So, for example, that they stop selling Polo and other pesticides that require this PPE, the personal protective equipment, which we heard from Dilip is not that readily available for like average farm workers, for example, in Yavatmal, but also in many other places as well. But unfortunately, Syngenta refused to engage properly on these demands. In particular, it refused to engage with the question whether Polo was at all relevant in these poisonings, and also that it didn't do enough in the already to prevent poisonings or to ensure safe use, basing their argument on the fact that they, for example, provided trainings. But we've heard already that this is all far not enough to actually change anything in like the risk of these pesticides, especially as all these measures had been in place already, and still they were not able to prevent any of these cases. And the decision of the NCP then in the end to not come to any conclusion was also criticized by the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights at that time as setting a bad precedent that underscores the weaknesses of national contact points for the OECD guidelines. And unfortunately, it also, is a bit similar to other experience of ECCHR using the OECD mechanisms. So it is really didn't really lead to anywhere. Which leads me now to the civil lawsuit, which was filed around the same time with the Civil Court of Basel City in Switzerland, where Syngenta is headquartered. It was filed by 2 widows whose husband had died from the use of pesticides in this wave of poisonings in 2017, and 1 survivor who himself had used Polo. And they demand that Syngenta pays compensation, which covers primarily the medical costs, and for the 2 widows also satisfaction for the death of their husbands. And this case was filed in 2021 after like a peaceful settlement, which is mandatory under the Swiss legal procedure, was without any result. And then in 2022, there was already like a very small success, let's say, which was that the plaintiffs were granted legal aid, which so requirement for legal aid under Swiss law is that firstly, the plaintiffs are not able to pay the legal costs associated with the proceedings. And secondly, that after a rough preliminary assessment by the court of the case, the court considers that the case is not void of chances of success. That's what the legal standard is there. So it didn't say anything positively about the outcome of the case, but it said at least it acknowledged that in principle, plaintiffs from the Global South can sue a Swiss corporation for damages from their pesticides. And now in June 2025, the court decided to start assessing evidence with regard to the use of Polo. So that's at least like one further step, while the proceedings before had been quite slow. It seems like this is now going to move on in a way. And next slide, please. I just want to go a little bit into detail also on the legal basis of the claim, because it's quite interesting beyond this particular case. It is based on the product liability law, which is the Swiss product liability law, but this law is modeled on the EU, on an EU law, the EU Product Liability Directive, which means that there is a very similar legal framework in place in like all EU countries, and also perhaps beyond, as the example of Switzerland, which is not part of the EU, but still chose to adopt a similar law. And while this law is primarily, like many people think of product liability law, if you're, I don't know, you buy a coffee machine and then it spills your trousers or something like that, you can claim the company for damages, but it's actually beyond that. So I just put some of the main legal provisions on the slide, which is first that the producer, shall be liable if the defective product causes death or injury to a person. And the second one is the scope on the producer, which is not only the one who produces the finished product or also basic material or a component, but also who represents themselves as the producer by affixing their name, trademark, or other distinguishing mark on the product. So for example, Syngenta, in this case, it doesn't really matter if they have produced, because the lawsuit is mainly against the Swiss the Swiss parent company, but it operates through subsidiaries. So, for example, there's Syngenta India, and then this provision basically says it doesn't even matter if the pesticide was produced by the parent company in Switzerland, but it is enough that Syngenta, the global corporation, basically puts their logo on the product and presents it as their own. And finally, very important is the question of when the product is defect, in this case, like the pesticide, which is also when it is not able to provide the safety which a person can expect from it in the way it is presented to the public, but also in the way that it is used. So, for example, in this case, the plaintiffs argue that, in the particular, you have to look at how is this pesticide, the Polo, used in the particular context in Yavatmal by average farm workers, which is not using PPE, like personal protective equipment, which is potentially also not being able to read the label or like whatever is said in the label about the toxicity due to not being presented in the local language, and so on and so forth. So and due to that, from the actual use of the product, it has to be decided whether this product is able to provide the safety that one can reasonably expect. And obviously no one can reasonably expect that the pesticide you use for your cotton fields is going to kill you. So this is quite what's going to happen here, or which is going to be assessed in the lawsuit. And now I just want to bring your attention to the fact that, Clara, can you put the next one, please, as well? It's sort of an announcement that there is a new product liability directive that had entered into force in December 2024, and it must be transposed into national law by December 2026. So all European countries, EU member states, need to have it adopted in their own law. And there are potentially more favorable rules on several aspects, actually, that would be relevant for a pesticide case, which concerns the damage, the defectiveness of the product, but also evidence and burden of proof. It's not like we haven't fully assessed or analyzed the new product liability directive, because it's also probably not really relevant for this case because it happened in the past. So it's like the the legal basis of the past will be more relevant, but it's more to like bring that also to your attention as something that might be worth like monitoring or looking into. Yeah, next slide, please. So, and I will just close with some very brief reflections that on like using civil lawsuits as a tool for corporate accountability, especially in the context of pesticides, poisonings and the pesticides trade, which is obviously like civil lawsuits, they always pose a very high hurdle. It's high costs. Here, luckily, the plaintiffs were able to receive legal aid, but also legal challenges, all sorts of logistical challenges, of course. And then there's always this matter of the burden of proof, which is entirely, at least under the current legal framework in Switzerland, is entirely on the plaintiffs, which is particularly problematic when it concerns a case with an extreme structural power imbalance, where the plaintiffs are survivors based in the global south with very little resources. I mean, in this case, we're speaking about farm workers. And they're seeking redress from a multinational company in the global north. And in addition, the civil lawsuit is also limited in what you can claim from the company, because you can claim, like in this case, the plaintiffs claim the compensation for damages, but they can't ask the court to really like stop its practices or fundamentally change its practices. What we can hope for is that the court sets a precedent that then will act sort of as a deterrent for Syngenta and for other companies to like deal differently with their pesticides products. But all of that really shows that what we needs to go beyond that, which is both a strong legal framework that imposes human rights obligations on companies that also provides effective judicial redress, but also, and more imminently important perhaps for this particular case, is an EU export ban on pesticides that are already banned in Europe. And with that, I would hand over to Laurent.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa. Perfect transition. Turning to Laurent Gabriel. So we've heard about the facts, we've heard about the case, we've heard about, the systemic root causes also in India, and now we're turning to you, Laurent, to talk more about also the root systemic issues in Europe and the double standard that is currently being allowed with the export of banned pesticides and the fight you're leading with other organizations on this. After you.
Thanks, Lara. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you perfectly well.
The slide is all right? Can you see the full screen?
No, we see both, but I think we can follow the slide.
Check if I can move that.
Maybe paramètres.
Yes, let me just check that. Okay. And now, where is it?
I think it was paramètres d'affichage en haut. And then there was something.
Okay, just one sec. Yes. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Excellent. So indeed, we'll take a broader look and look at this topic from the angle of the export of banned pesticides. Because as you've heard and as we reported at the time in 2018, this product that was involved in the wave of poisoning in Yavatmal, this product called Polo, in fact, was exported from Switzerland, although it's banned in Switzerland and in Europe. How do I move to the next slide? Yes. It was banned, so diphenhydramine was the name of the chemical substance which entered in the composition of Polo, which is the name of the product. Diphenhydramine was banned in 2009 in Switzerland. As you can see on the left side, it was even banned earlier in the EU. there's not a lot of information about the reason it was banned. We couldn't find any formal decision at Swiss or EU level. But as you can see on the right, and as was already mentioned by Dilip, the substance is considered highly hazardous by the European Chemical Agency because it's toxic in case of inhalation. It's also toxic to aquatic life, and it may cause damage to organs in case of repeated or prolonged exposure. So it was banned in 2009 in Switzerland. But in fact, as we find out, it was still exported from Switzerland by one company, Syngenta. And here is the export notification. So that is the documents that Syngenta sent at the time to the Swiss authorities to announce the export of difenthrione to India. On the left side, you can see difenthrione. And you can see that it was 95%. So it was the chemical difenthrione that was later used in India by Syngenta India to manufacture the product Polo. And on the right side, you can see that it went to India. It was done in 2017, and the amount was 75 tons. And so that is the document that we could obtain from the Swiss authorities that proved that, in fact, this chemical that was involved in the poisoning in India had been made in Switzerland and exported from Switzerland to India. In fact, all of this issue comes from a loophole in Swiss and EU laws, and in fact in the laws of most of the countries around the world, which is that on the left side, you can see that's the regulation, the EU regulation that regulates pesticide at EU level. As you can see, the regulation focuses on the placing of pesticide on the EU market. And as you can see also, when a product is withdrawn from the market, it's indeed withdrawn from the market, but the ban and the approval, in fact, of the product only applies to the use of the pesticide within the EU market, within the Swiss market. It does not apply to the production for export to third markets. When it comes to export, there's one piece of legislation which is valid in Switzerland, in the EU, in the UK as well, which is the PIC regulation, the Prior Informed Consent regulation. That's on the right side. That's the Swiss ordinance to implement this Prior Informed Consent regulation. That comes basically from the Rotterdam Convention, and it's been implemented in the EU and Switzerland in a way that applies to a broader range of chemicals, not only those listed in the Rotterdam Convention, but a broader range of chemicals. Basically, it's supposed to apply to any chemicals that is banned in Switzerland or in Europe. And it regulates the trade, but it does not ban the trade in these chemicals. As you can see, it's basically a notification and information system. So basically companies, when a chemical is listed under this regulation, a company that wants to export it to third countries need to inform the authorities, to notify the authorities about its intention to export a chemical. And then the importing country will receive this export notification so that they are informed that there's an export coming. But that's an information and notification system. In fact, the system, the regulation does not prohibit the export of banned pesticide. So this is the main issue that we're having, that when a pesticide is banned, the ban only applies to the use of the pesticide in the country. It does not apply to the manufacturer for export of the same pesticide. When we released this investigation in 2018, it had a big coverage in Switzerland and internationally. But in Switzerland, it was especially a major issue because it was the first time that you could link the export of a banned pesticide to very strong adverse effects in importing countries, that we could make this link. And because of this link, because it was really the involvement of a pesticide which had been exported from Switzerland, banned here, but exported from Switzerland, and it had been involved in the poisoning, massive wave of poisoning of farmers in India, this created a big scandal in Switzerland. And the story was really reported in all the key media outlets in Switzerland, also abroad. But in Switzerland, it's important to emphasize because this led the government to take action. But before talking about that, just to mention that difenthrione was one case, a very serious case, but in fact, it's not an isolated case in the sense that it's not the only banned pesticide that was exported from Switzerland during that time. In 2020, we released this mapping. This was a mapping of all the Swiss export of banned pesticide during the period 2012-2019. You can see difenthrione going to India, but you can see that difenthrione also was exported to South Africa. You had also the case of profenophos being exported from Switzerland to Brazil. So in fact, it was one example, difenthrione, but not a unique case. And in fact, Switzerland had been exporting banned pesticides for a couple of years now. So in 2020, the Swiss government took action, and that was really the result of this investigation in Yavatmal, really the result of this outrage, big media scandal, saying, hey, a banned pesticide exported from Switzerland killed Indian farmers, led a lot of Indian farmers to hospital. This really created a strong pressure on the Swiss government to act. In 2020, they announced that they would strengthen the rules. What they did is basically two things. First, they announced that 5 banned pesticides would now be prohibited from being exported from Switzerland. And this list included difenthrione. So difenthrione cannot be exported anymore from Switzerland right now. But 4 other pesticides, including atrazine, paraquat, profenophos, and methylathione. In fact, if you look at those 5 that the governments of Switzerland prohibit now from export, those were the 5 that Switzerland used to export during the precedent years. So basically the approach was, okay, what we did export during the past years will be now prohibited from being exported. And for all the others, so all the other banned pesticides, they also strengthened the rules, and they said now we will require a company not only to inform the importing country, but we will require the prior informed consent of the country before the export takes place. And they decided to apply this rule, the prior informed consent rule, to all the banned pesticides that are listed under the Swiss PIC ordinance. So that was also quite an improvement, although we were disappointed. We would have we had pushed together with our organization for full export ban that would apply to all the pesticides that are banned in Switzerland, but it was still a good step in the right direction. Now, the problem is that there's like a big loophole in the Swiss law, and the problem is linked to the implementation of the export ban. And the main issue is that, in fact, they have not updated the list of pesticides subject to this regulation since 2020, so since more than 5 years now. And it's what the government is saying is that the next update of the list will enter into force only in 2028, so 2 years from now, meaning that all the pesticides that have been banned since 2019 basically are not covered by the Swiss regulation, not covered at all. So meaning they can be exported without even notifying the importing countries, without notifying the Swiss government. And so they remain invisible. And there's dozens of dangerous pesticides have been banned since 2019 and are out of scope of the Swiss regulation. To name a few, the neonics are out of scope, chlorpyrifos, chlorothalonil. A lot of those very dangerous pesticides have been banned, in fact, quite recently, and they are out of scope. So that is the major issue we're having now with the Swiss regulation when it comes to export of banned pesticides. The EU also is exporting banned pesticides. This is a map that we released in 2020 showing that more than 80,000 tons of banned pesticide had been exported from the EU. That was quite massive. At the time, the UK was the leading exporter, and we had this map. It was also quite a big impact, this investigation. It was the first time that we really could map one single year of exports from all the EU countries. It took us several months to to gather the data and analyze it. And it had quite an impact because a few weeks after we released the investigation, the European Commission, in its chemical strategy released in October 2020, so just 1 month after we released the investigation, they included a commitment to ensure that hazardous chemicals banned in the EU are not produced for export. So that was quite a win. And at the time also, that's when some national export ban came in place. So France, there was an export ban that entered into force in 2022 in France, and Belgium also took that decision. The Belgium export ban just entered into force in May last year, in May 25. Well, as you can see from the left article, there are loopholes in the French export ban, but these loopholes have just been eliminated this year. There were 2 major loopholes in the French export ban that allowed companies to keep exporting. Some banned pesticides, not all of them, but some of them. But now the Parliament and the Court of Justice in France took a decision to cancel those loopholes. So in principle, starting from now, January 2026, it's not longer possible to export banned pesticides from France anymore. And the same goes for Belgium, although we'll have to assess the impact of the Belgium export ban. One limitation is that Belgium is working with a list of pesticides that are banned from export. And of course, the list needs to be updated. Otherwise, if you're out of the list, you can be exported from the country. But 2 countries and 2 main exporting countries, if you look back at the map, you know, Belgium and France were among the top exporting countries from Europe. Those 2 countries took a very important decision to decide that when it's banned in Europe, it's also banned for export to third countries. Unfortunately, at EU level, yes, I'm nearly in the end.
Okay.
Unfortunately, at EU level, the Commission has a bit backtracked on its promise. So in 2020, they said that they would come up with a proposal to ban the export of banned pesticide in 2023. This didn't happen, mainly because of pressure from the industry, but also because the political climate has changed a lot since 2020. 2020 was the Green Deal and all the hype around this. And now it's all about employment and competitiveness. So the mindset has changed a lot in Brussels, and the Commission did not deliver on its promise, but we're still hoping that they will at some point come up with a proposal. Our latest investigation, which was released last year in September, showed that while the European Commission did not act to stop these exports, in fact, these exports have been increasing from the EU. You see that in 2024, we reached more than 120,000 tons of banned pesticides being exported from the EU, compared to 80,000 tons in 2018. So quite an increase, especially if you take into account that the UK, which was the leading exporter at the time in 2018, is now not part of the EU. So in fact, if you take out the UK, the increase was 2.5, by a factor of 2.5 during those years. There's a coalition of NGOs that is really active at EU level and pushing the Commission to deliver. So let's hope that will succeed. In June this year, for example, there's a statement that was released and signed by more than 600 NGOs from Europe, trade unions from Europe, but also from all around the world, calling the Commission to deliver on its promise. And just in December last year, in Brussels, we did a nice action, a return to sender action in front of the Commission, where we brought back basically packaged empty containers of pesticides that the EU had been exporting during the last years in front of the Commission. And so this is the Toxic Pesticide Trade Coalition, and you're all welcome to join to put pressure on the Commission and on the EU to deliver on its promise. And I'm done. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Laurent. Thank you to all speakers. We really have I think now a full picture of, the systemic issues and some insights on the case that is going on now in Switzerland. So I'm opening the floor for questions. Feel free to raise your hand, ask your question, or you can also write it in the chat. I see that there was already one question about any lawsuits filed against Syngenta subsidiaries in India. So yes, my understanding is there were no such cases happening in India. And then there is a question for you, Laurent, in the chat. I don't know if you can see it and if you want to answer.
Yes, on the PIC, on the Rotterdam and the PIC system. Indeed, the intention initially was to basically inform countries so that they can make that choice. And that's the response that we always received, in fact, from EU authorities. When we were saying the EU should ban the export of banned pesticides, they were saying, hey, but through this system, Tanzania, India, Uganda, they are informed, no? And if they don't want those exports, they are free to reject them or to act or to ban these pesticides, in fact, their own jurisdiction. But what we are seeing is indeed that because of a lack of capacities in these countries, the system is not really working. In some countries, you have even no offices to receive those notifications. So there's a fax that is being sent from here, but no one reads it in these countries. Also, we have to be aware that generally those focal points in these countries are in the Ministry of Environment, and often they have no say about the approval of pesticides in their country. So they receive the information that a pesticide is coming, but that's all they can do. They have no power to take action, for example, to restrict or ban this pesticide. That generally leads with the Ministry of Agriculture. And also, if you look at these notifications, there's a lot of room for improvement indeed, because in fact, what countries get is only a list of hazard codes that is very difficult to understand. And the reason why the pesticide was banned in Europe or in Switzerland is not even indicated. So what you get is just an announcement that difenthurion, a compound that you don't even know, is coming, and that's all. And you have a list of hazard codes. So it has a lot of room for improvement. And indeed, in the end, yes, training capacities of developing country officials to basically regulate better those pesticides. In my view, the fact that it's banned in Europe is a strong case for these countries to also refuse or ban these pesticides there, because if the EU, with all its capacities and resources, conclude that this is too dangerous for use in the EU, how could it be used safely in a context like India or Tanzania? I mean, that is the approach that I think should be taken, because risk assessment of pesticide regulation takes a lot of resources, and many of these countries don't have these resources. So they should take the ban in the EU as a proof that it's too dangerous for them as well.
Thank you, Laurent, for the answer. Thank you for the question. I'm going to take the hand that is raised, and then I will read some of the questions that are in the chat. So after you, Leah Otiasheva.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to all the presenters for this very interesting information. My name is Leah Yutasheva. I work for the Center for Pesticide Suicide Prevention at the University of Edinburgh. My question is to the legal experts. How are you, during the case, how are you going to prove that the poisonings in your 3 cases of 2 victims and 1 survivor was caused by the pesticide Polo? Because we do, in our work with a lot of pesticide poisonings, we collect information and data from toxicology labs. And I understand that it's very hard to prove a connection to a particular pesticide sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to turn to Teresa Mokel. I think it's a good opportunity to give maybe a bit more information on the next steps also of the proceedings, because we are in the evidentiary now phase. And I think some part of the contradictory exchanges are not going to be preempted now in this session, but after you, Teresa, maybe to give an update.
Yeah, perhaps just briefly, as you said, like that, I think in these cases it is always it's never easy to establish this link, and in this case there was quite some documentation of the use of Polo in documents linked to the specific instances of poisonings, like it was reported in the police reports that Dilip mentioned, that they were taken of the pesticide of the poisoning cases. It was mentioned in medical reports, plus obviously the statements of the family members and the one survivor himself about the use of Polo. But it is something that will definitely be an important point in the court case in itself. And for now, actually on the yes, exactly. I just wanted to say, Leah, we're also happy to exchange on that a bit more directly. But right now, the court will actually start with assessing the question whether Polo was used at all. And then I think it would go, so whether this played a role factually, and then the next question would probably be whether it can be concluded that Polo itself also caused the poisonings. But that's, a question for later proceedings. Which, of course, they're like studies are involved, and it's very much about what documentation is there also about the toxicity of Polo.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is a question in the chat. Was India notified under the Rotterdam Convention when the diaphanthurion was exported, and did they raise the incident officially? I mean, I guess Dilip or Hedi, you want to answer on that point?
Yeah, so unfortunately, India did not report it to Rotterdam Convention or international fora when this poisoning happened. So that was one lacune. Because if it was notified, then there could be more avenues for international regulation, including the PIC procedure, so that other countries who receive imports from European Union could restrict its usage or prevent its usage. So it did not happen somehow.
If I can just add something, which is an important detail, which is that also I showed you in my first slide was the export notification that was sent by Switzerland to India. So to respond this aspect, yes, India was notified of these exports. Now, about the Rotterdam Convention, it's true that India didn't raise it there, but it's also true that diaphanthurion is not listed under the Rotterdam Convention. So it's not covered by the Rotterdam Convention. It's a banned pesticide, but it's not listed under the Rotterdam Convention because the Rotterdam Convention covers only a small list of banned pesticides, in fact. And we know that the Rotterdam Convention now is a bit blocked, and that the listing of new pesticides is always a problem because consensus is never reached. So in fact, the list has not been expanded recently. For example, paraquat, there's a discussion for years to list paraquat, and it's being blocked by countries, including by India and other countries. So no, it's not being notified under the Rotterdam Convention because it's not listed. But yes, it was notified to the government because it's listed under the Swiss regulation and under the EU regulation, which applies to the export of banned pesticides. The way Switzerland and EU implemented Rotterdam Convention is in fact quite good because they decided to apply this system of notification not only to the list of pesticides covered by the Rotterdam Convention, but to any pesticides which have been banned in Switzerland and Europe because of their effects on human health or the environment. This is why diaphanthurion was covered.
Thank you very much for your answers. Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of the time planned for the webinar. There is a way to actually address some of your questions, and then we can answer it in writing. If you want to reach out, I left my mail in the chat. for you too, Leah Utyasheva, if we want to discuss more on the next procedural steps and the evidentiary. That is always a struggle in this kind of civil cases. Thank you very much for joining us today. Feel free to take note now of my email address. Reach out to us. Don't hesitate to reach out also if you're doing this kind of litigation. We're not much in Europe. Just checking the last message. Yes. Thank you very much to all our speakers and for you to joining us today.